They were never buried, just misaligned. Hidden in the mist-wrapped countryside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, stands the crumbling skeleton of what locals still call Vexmore House, a forgotten Victorian estate built on colonial wealth and sealed by silence. Its centerpiece, a 60-foot bell tower crafted from blackened stone, home to a bell that was never meant to ring yet somehow. Did. Not once, but again and again, always before someone vanished without a trace. A grieving father, a vanished woman, a soldier pulled from midair, all victims of what researchers now call interdimensional resonance. In 2022, for the first time, scientists tried to unlock the truth. What they found suggests that haunted places might not be haunted at all, but leaking. Welcome to the forbidden story of the bell tower that listens back. This is not just another ghost story. This is a quantum haunting. In the autumn of 1847, a man named Alaric Vexmore returned to the American Northeast with coffers full of colonial wealth and something far more dangerous, a bell forged in silence. Pulled from a ruined temple deep in the jungles of southern India, where sound was considered a sacred violation. He purchased 200 acres of fog-soaked farmland outside Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and began construction on a mansion unlike anything the region had ever seen. Locals watched in confusion as the skeletal frame of a 60-foot tower rose first, long before the foundation of the house itself, its narrow stone spire piercing the sky like a needle through fabric. Vexmore insisted the tower be completed before winter. When asked why, he simply replied, because it must be housed before it's heard. The bell arrived under canvas in the dead of night, tarnished silver black, strangely cold to the touch, and disturbingly quiet. When workers attempted to test it, not a single sound echoed back. No vibration. No resonance. Just silence so pure it felt predatory. That was the first sign something was wrong. But no one would understand what they were building, not yet. Not until the first time it rang. Some structures weren't built for the living. They were built to contain what should never be heard. In the rolling hills outside Lancaster, Pennsylvania, surrounded by dying fields and whispering trees, the ruins of Vexmore House still stand like a forgotten wound. But long before it decayed into legend, it began with obsession. In 1847, Alaric Vexmore, a merchant enriched by the East India trade, returned from abroad with a vision and something else. Not gold, not gemstones, but a bell veiled in cloth and silence. Its origins whispered to be a cursed relic from a temple where sound was outlawed and sacrifice was quiet. No one in Lancaster knew why Vexmore chose that land, but locals spoke of strange magnetism birds avoiding the skies above, compasses trembling off course, and animals refusing to graze near the clearing. Before a single stone of the mansion was laid, the tower came first, rising like a bone from the earth, tall, narrow, wrong, as if the land itself tried to reject it. Residents asked why a bell tower with no church, no community, no purpose. Vexmore only replied, "It's not for the living to hear." And they didn't, not yet, but the structure was listening, watching, waiting, and what it housed was never truly silent. He didn't bring back treasure, he brought back a frequency. When Alaric Vexmore returned from his decade-long dealings with the East India Company, he came home not with the usual spoils of empire, but with a singular, obsessive purpose. His journals, later uncovered beneath the floorboards of his private study, reveal a man enthralled by something he never fully described, only hinted at in fragmented phrases, the sound beneath silence, the weight of a tone never heard, and the chamber where breath dies before it becomes voice. Those who met him during his return noted a strange shift in his demeanour, once charismatic and ambitious. Vexmore had grown distant, cold, speaking in riddles, always drawing towers in the margins of letters, always mentioning containment. He wasted no time purchasing the land and personally oversaw the first shipment, a massive crate shipped from Kolkata, delivered under military escort, unmarked, unspoken. No servants were allowed near it. When asked by his architect what it held, Vexmore whispered, a voice so old it forgot how to scream. The crate was sealed in iron and moved directly into the base of the rising tower. And from that day on, every blueprint, every corridor, every measurement of Vexmore House was aligned around one thing, the bell. But this was no symbol of worship or warning. It was a lock, and no one realized it had already begun to shift. It wasn't the silence that unsettled them. It was the way it felt like listening back. The bell arrived, encased in iron and cloth, accompanied by handwritten instructions from Vexmore that it was to be handled only by gloved hands and never, under any circumstance, struck during transport. When the workers finally lifted the veil from the artifact, several stepped back instinctively. It was beautiful, but wrong. The surface shimmered with a black-silver sheen, but not like polished metal. It looked like something ancient pretending to be metal, as if it had remembered the shape of a bell, but not the material. Its surface was covered in symbols no one could translate, etched so finely that they seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. The master bell hanger, a man with 40 years of experience, said it was the only time he had touched a bell and felt nothing. No resonance, no vibration, no echo. When struck with a tuning hammer, the bell made no sound. None. But several men swore the air moved. One described it as something shifting just behind your ears. Vexmore dismissed their concerns with a single line. You didn't strike it. It struck you. The bell was hoisted into the tower by hand, each movement tracked with near religious precision. Once mounted, it hung perfectly still in the open chamber, and though it made no sound, some claimed it pulsed faintly on certain nights, as if dreaming. No one knew it had already begun listening. And it wouldn't be long before it answered. The first time it rang, no one was near the tower. It was a windless spring night in 1848 when a low, unnatural tone rolled across the valley, not like a bell, but like something buried groaning to wake. The sound was impossibly deep, like it had passed through miles of stone before reaching human ears. Every animal within a 3-mile radius fled. Several clocks in town stopped exactly at 3:17 a.m. Vexmore, according to letters recovered later, was already awake. He wrote, "It's begun the conversation." And from that moment forward, nothing about Vexmore House was silent again. Servants began reporting strange whispers behind walls, footsteps that never approached, and dreams filled with spirals and static. Most quit. The few who stayed, they didn't last long, because the bell didn't just ring, it remembered who listened. And the first to disappear would be Vexmore's own daughter. Her footsteps stopped halfway down the stairs and never resumed. On the morning of May 3rd, 1848, Honora Vexmore, Alaric's only child, vanished inside the mansion without a sound, a scream, or a single trace. She was 11. A servant named Elsie was the last to see her, standing barefoot at the top of the grand staircase, staring out a window that didn't exist the day before. When questioned, Elsie swore the child's eyes were frozen open, as if hearing something she couldn't unhear. They found her slippers on the third step, nothing more. No broken wood, no signs of struggle, just the faint scent of ozone, and a low humming in the walls that made the skin behind your ears crawl. Alaric sealed the staircase that evening, declaring it structurally unsound, but whispers spread through the servants' quarters that Honora was not gone, just somewhere else, a place adjacent to the house but not inside it. From that day forward, rooms began to shift. Doors led to walls. Hallways shortened. And on some nights, people claimed to hear Honora's voice calling from inside the bell tower, even though no one had ever seen her climb it. And no one ever would. Because something had answered. They said the house began breathing, but only when no one was speaking. After Honora's disappearance, Vexmore House became a maze of shifting sounds and impossible geometry. Workers reported hearing doors unlatch by themselves, not with creaks or clicks, but with exhalations, like lungs opening. Rooms would subtly change size from one day to the next. A hallway that once led to the library would twist overnight and lead instead to a blank wall until you blinked, and it was gone. More disturbingly, people began losing time inside the house. They'd enter a room for a moment and come out thinking minutes had passed, only to discover they'd been missing for hours. One stable boy was found in the cellar, eyes bloodshot, whispering. The bell knows I looked at it. His tongue was covered in tiny symmetrical burns, like he'd tasted metal etched in patterns. But the most chilling incident came when a visiting priest attempted to bless the grounds. As he stepped into the foyer, every candle in the house extinguished at once, and his rosary cracked clean in half. He fled that night and never returned. What terrified him most wasn't the silence, it was what he heard inside it, a question in a voice older than language. And it wouldn't stop asking. The bell tower was never locked, but it never needed to be. No one dared climb it, even during the day. The spiral staircase that led to the upper chamber seemed to tilt subtly toward the dark, as if the tower itself discouraged descent. But one man, Thomas Greaves, a stonemason and veteran of the Mexican-American War, ignored the warnings. He was hired to inspect structural integrity after several tremors were felt beneath the mansion. Armed with chalk, a lantern, and a measuring rope, he entered the tower just after sunrise. He never came back down. Not in one piece. Hours later, a single sound thundered through the valley. The bell. This time, it rang not once, but 13 times. The final toll trailing off into something that wasn't an echo, but a dissonant reply like metal collapsing into breath. When the housekeeper found Greaves, he was on the front steps, barefoot, eyes rolled back, skin cold. He was alive, but different. He spoke in reversed Latin. His heartbeat pulsed at a different rhythm, exactly 13 beats per minute. He couldn't explain what happened, only whispered, "It's not a bell, it's a door," and I knocked. After that, he stopped speaking altogether. And then, 1 week later, he vanished entirely, leaving behind only his rope tied in a loop that ended at the tower, but never began. Vexmore's obsession deepened as the house unravelled. He stopped leaving the estate, filling journals with diagrams, timelines, and impossible equations all orbiting the bell. He believed it was not crafted, but received, not metal, but something fossilized in time, left like a seed. And every time it rang, reality shifted slightly, just enough to go unnoticed by most, but not by him. Because Alaric Vexmore had begun to hear something no one else could, a melody buried inside the silence. A pattern that didn't just echo, it answered. And he was no longer writing to understand it. He was writing to remember what was real. And soon, even that would begin to fracture. He nailed shut every window, burned every mirror, and stopped answering letters, even those from Parliament. By autumn, Alaric Vexmore was no longer a reclusive nobleman. He was a man besieged by his own home. Servants were dismissed. Horses refused to cross the gate. The air inside the manor turned dense, thick like syrup. And on some nights, the bell would toll without vibrating. It didn't swing. It didn't move, but the sound came anyway, wet, resonant, and inside your chest instead of your ears. Alaric became gaunt, barely recognizable, muttering phrases like, "It's remembering itself," and "every ring is closer to waking." He began to draw circular glyphs on the walls using his own blood, each one slightly different, slightly more alive than the last. The few who dared visit found the paintings moved ever so subtly when unobserved, like lungs breathing behind plaster. His journals grew frantic. Words began folding over themselves, margins scrawled with mirrored scripture, pages fused with a black, sap-like resin no chemist could identify. But most chilling was a final, half-torn page. The bell rang again last night, but I didn't hear it with my ears, I heard it with my name. By the winter of 1843, the mansion itself began to rebel. Floors would ripple like water under Alaric's feet. Books flew from shelves, not violently, but deliberately, as if rejecting certain knowledge. The grandfather clock struck 13 at midnight, and no one could stop it, not even by removing the gears. Alaric's handwriting became unrecognizable, curving into ancient-looking symbols no linguist could trace. He wasn't sleeping, he wasn't eating. Yet he claimed the house had begun feeding him something else. One night, a local constable was sent to check on the manor. He returned before dawn, eyes glassy, whispering, "He's not alone in there, and neither are we." The local vicar tried to intervene, sending holy men to cleanse the grounds. But they didn't make it past the gate. Every time they approached, the wind blew inward, as if the house was breathing them in. And above it all, always the bell rang. Louder now, not just once or twice, but in patterns, as if calling something back, not forward. Back, and Vexmore began to answer. He wasn't unravelling. He was becoming the house. Then came the disappearances. Not of people, but of hours. Entire stretches of time simply vanished from the journals. Entries would jump from Tuesday morning to Friday dusk, with no mention of what occurred in between. When neighbours asked about the gaps, Vexmore replied flatly, "Those days belonged to the bell." Strange lights began pulsing from the tower. Not flickering, but beating. In perfect rhythm with the sounds no one admitted hearing. The ground around the estate cracked in rings. forming perfect concentric circles as if something massive had once landed and was now beneath. Trees twisted toward the tower, their bark spiraling unnaturally. Birds flew in reverse spirals overhead. No animals entered the forest. And Alaric, he began to vanish in fragments. One maid claimed she saw him walking the halls without a face, skin stretched smooth as porcelain. Another swore she watched him split into 3 versions of himself, each speaking in a different tongue, none of them human. Every letter sent from the manor was blank, except for one phrase burned into the parchment. The 13th ring is the key. He wasn't just haunted. He was preparing something to return, and it would not come alone. What if the bell wasn't a warning, but an invitation by the final weeks of Alaric Vexmore's isolation? The manor no longer resembled a home. It felt more like a threshold, a place where dimensions brushed up against each other, thin as paper and fraying at the edges. And when the bell rang a 13th time without striking, something finally stepped through. They found the bell tower hollow, no bell, no mechanism, no stairs, just a vast, spiraling shaft carved with symbols no culture had ever recorded, as if language itself had been peeled apart and reassembled for something else. At the base of the shaft, embedded into the stone, lay 13 human molars, each fused to the rock as if grown from it. Vexmore's journal, discovered beside them, was filled with identical entries repeated over and over. I heard the bell before I built the tower. The handwriting changed with each repetition, sometimes delicate, sometimes manic, once even mirror reversed. Experts who read it experienced sudden nosebleeds, migraines, and in one case, a 48-hour blackout. The architecture of the manor had also changed. Doorways now opened into each other, hallways folding back like paper creases, making escape geometrically impossible. And in the centre of the house, no longer a room, but a chamber, stood Vexmore himself, or rather, what remained. His mouth was stitched shut, yet the sound of the bell kept coming from somewhere inside his chest. The portraits had changed. Every painting inside Vexmore Manor, once proud oil renderings of noble ancestors, now depicted the same gaunt figure with hollow eyes and a twisted neck, standing beneath a night sky with 13 red moons. No brushstrokes, no canvas texture. The images looked photographic, impossibly modern, as if printed with technology that didn't exist. When touched, the paint rippled like water, and some claimed it whispered their names backwards. One visitor collapsed after swearing he saw his own corpse nailed into the frame behind the canvas. In the cellar, carved into the stone walls, were outlines of human figures in fetal position, scratched so deeply into the rock that archaeologists declared they predated the foundation by centuries. But most chilling of all, under the floorboards of the nursery, they found a 13th crib, buried upside down, its wood scorched black, its mobile still spinning without wind. Vexmore had no children. Yet on the inside wall, drawn in what appeared to be blood, were the words, "The bell was my midwife. I was born inside the silence." The bell didn't just ring, it remembered. A group of sound engineers from the university had been invited to Vexmore to analyse the toll, hoping to debunk its legend as mere acoustics. But when they played back the recording at half speed, a child's voice emerged, repeating a phrase in perfect reverse, Latin, domus intus, Respirat the house breathes inside. The waveform data showed impossible anomalies, patterns that resembled heartbeat rhythms and fetal brain activity. One technician went into a seizure mid-analysis, screaming that he could feel teeth under his skin. Days later, he vanished without a trace. The bell, upon closer inspection, bore inscriptions not etched, but grown, as if the brass had developed veins. A metallurgist confessed before gouging out her own eyes that the bell was not cast, but born screaming. The final audio clip leaked online and was removed in less than 2 hours. Those who heard it reported the same dream that night, trapped in a womb of stone, unable to move, hearing 13 heartbeats, but none were their own. Then came the drawings, hundreds of them, tucked beneath floorboards, behind plaster walls, even inside sealed organ pipes, each scrawled in charcoal or dried blood by a child's hand. They depicted a faceless woman emerging from the bell tower, limbs twisted backwards, her feet not touching the ground. In every image, she was surrounded by 13 smaller figures, children with hollow eyes and mouths sewn shut. But the most disturbing part, each drawing was dated, and the dates extended into the future. One sheet read, August 19th, 2026, next month. Another, folded 12 times and buried under the chapel's altar, was labelled tonight. Paranormal investigators found fingerprints on that last one, fresh, human, and belonging to a child who died in 1891. DNA analysis matched multiple samples to children buried beneath the chapel. Some of the graves were empty. As panic spread, residents began reporting a strange ringing in their ears at 3:13 a.m., the exact time the bell used to toll. And when they checked their phones, they found new photos, selfies taken inside the bell tower, even if they'd never stepped inside. And now comes the reckoning. When whispers turn to screams and denial gives way to dread, what's left behind isn't just fear, it's infection. Ashervale Chapel isn't just haunted, it's a contagion of memory, bleeding into the minds of anyone who dares to look too closely. The investigators didn't just disappear, they were erased, not killed, but forgotten, as if they'd never existed at all. And those who watched the footage, some of them started drawing the same 13 children. Others reported waking up in pews they'd never visited, speaking languages they'd never learned. The government quietly fenced off the property, citing structural decay, but those who live nearby say the bells still toll at 3:13 a.m. sharp. What happens when the boundary between memory and reality finally collapses? That's where we're going next. They say the footage was confiscated, sealed in an evidence locker that no longer exists, but rumours leaked of a child humming underwater, of fingernail marks etched into stone, of one agent who carved the same word over and over into his own arm. Remember. Months after the chapel was closed, nearby residents reported bizarre symptoms, nosebleeds at 3:13 a.m., synchronized dreams of drowning, and infants who wouldn't stop staring at corners no one else dared look toward. Psychiatrists called it mass delusion. But then the dreams spread. People miles away began sketching copper wire crucifixes without knowing why. A woman in Nashville claimed she gave birth to twins that spoke in whispers of salt. The town of Ashervale quietly depopulated. The census skipped it. GPS reroutes you away. It's like the earth itself is trying to forget it existed. But trauma doesn't vanish. It ripples. It waits. and something tells me we were never supposed to unearth this. Not the chapel, not the children, and certainly not the date carved into every pew, March 14th. They demolished the chapel, but the ground refused to forget. Construction crews reported tools vanishing, concrete refusing to set, and workers waking up with their boots full of saltwater miles from the sea. One man disappeared for 12 minutes and came back aged years, unable to speak but mumbling the same phrase she remembers the breath. Local wildlife abandoned the area completely. No birds, no insects, no sound. When the foundation was finally cleared, a sinkhole opened beneath the altar, revealing a staircase carved in bone spiraling downward into nothing. They sealed it with federal cement, covered it with playground gravel, and posted a single rusted sign, "Do not dig." But even now, children born nearby are different. Some speak languages no one taught them. Others hum that same melody from the lost recordings. The name Latoya appears in notebooks they've never seen. Parents say they blink and find their kids standing in the shower, not wet, not blinking, just listening to what no one knows. But every year, on March 14th, the water pressure drops for 13 seconds, and the humming returns. Years later, a clinical therapist from Boston claimed to treat a young girl who drew diagrams of the Blessed Mercy Infirmary accurate to its 1847 layout, down to the hidden cellars no longer listed in records. When questioned, the girl insisted she'd never been to Fall River, but said she dreamed of a woman named Latoya who taught her to breathe under walls. The girl passed a lie detector. Then came others, a boy in Oregon, a teenager in Detroit, an elderly woman with dementia in Louisiana, all repeating fragments of the same nursery rhyme, one no historian could trace. On social media, threads emerged of people recalling the same dream, a hallway with 11 doors, only one of them breathing. Some tried to recreate it in digital simulations. Every one of them crashed at door number 6. The last developer to attempt it left a post before vanishing. She's still choosing. Even now, the archived case files remain corrupted, audio distorted, photos smudged from the inside. Some say it's over, but those who know the rhythm of that 3-note melody understand Latoya never left. She was only waiting for a signal. The building that once housed Blessed Mercy Infirmary was finally torn down in 1996 after years of legal deadlock and local resistance. But no matter how deep they dug, the basement kept returning. Concrete poured in 1 week would be cracked open by the next. Surveillance set up to monitor the foundation recorded nothing unusual except on March 14th every year, when the footage would blur for exactly 37 seconds, and the faint sound of breathing could be heard beneath the static. Several construction workers later reported seeing wet handprints on the inside of sealed drywall, too small to belong to any adult. One man quit on the spot after hearing a voice whisper his daughter's name, even though he hadn't told anyone he had children. When demolition was complete, a new facility was never approved. The ground was declared unstable, but residents still avoid it, not out of fear, but out of reverence, like something sacred and forgotten still lives beneath the soil. And every now and then, someone walking by reports hearing a melody in the wind. 3 notes. Always the same 3 notes. Decades after Latoya's final night, Blessed Mercy Infirmary still haunts the medical field, not as a ghost story, but as a forbidden footnote in psychiatric history. No official record of her ever existed. Yet over a dozen former staff members have anonymously admitted to recalling her case in fragments. A doctor confessed under hypnosis that he dreamt of her every March, her eyes bleeding salt water, whispering a name he didn't recognize. A nurse reportedly took her own life after painting hundreds of nearly identical portraits of LaToya, each labelled, "I remember you." One patient's journal, recovered from an archived box mislabelled "unrelated," described the exact events of LaToya's 37-day stay, 2 years before she ever arrived. Today, students at the nearby medical school are warned never to mention room 3A, and the hallway where it once stood has been sealed behind a mural. But those who dare to press their ear to the wall claim they hear something breathing, slow and rhythmic, like a lullaby forgotten by time. No explanation has ever been accepted. No theory satisfies. Because LaToya wasn't just a patient. She was a return. So if you've made it this far, ask yourself this. Was LaToya real? Or was she what we're all afraid of becoming? A vessel for memories that don't belong to us. A name that slips through time not to be remembered, but to remind. Her story isn't just about ghosts or institutions. It's about the weight of history buried beneath polite silence. The kind we all inherit. And if these 37 days at Blessed Mercy have taught us anything, it's that some truths knock once and wait forever. So now it's your turn. What do you believe LaToya was? A survivor, a spirit, a warning? Let us know in the comments below. If this story unsettled you in ways you didn't expect, save it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe for more dark history that was never meant to resurface. Because some doors, once opened, refuse to close.